Paul, thanks very much for joining us on the podcast today, mate. How's it going today?
Good.
Yeah.
Just back for a trip for Liverpool, so a wee bit tired, but all good.
Tired. Thanks for making the effort to come through. So obviously we knew each other, we were at the same school. It was a couple of years above you at school, and our paths crossed just a couple of months ago online, when you got win the charity challenge that I was doing, and then I obviously seen the support that you were offering to people out there that were dealing with addictions of certain types and mental health problems in general. Tell us a bit about your experiences. When I knew you, I think it's easy for people to stereotype, but when I knew you in your late teens and early 20s, you were always up for a laugh, always jumping about daft. Like, mental health problems and addictions are not labels that I would ever associate with yourself, and that's me being brutally honest. But it just shows how life experiences can change and trauma and stuff can affect you. But start for the start. Tell us when you first kind of experienced problems, and what was that due to?
I think it's important what you mentioned, how it's not something that you would associate with me, and in my own experience I've learned that it doesn't really have a face, although we like to think it's got a stereotypical display. It's silent to the point where people can be dealing with pain and not show it. They might not display it. I started following your challenge, and for me that's an external demonstration of the pain and the pain that people carry. And like you touched on that, as people are in pain or they're suffering and they're carrying that every day, whether that be physical, whether it be mental, whether it be an illness, whether it's mental illness. And for me that's symbolic to the pain, trauma, suffering, no matter how you describe it. That challenge was symbolic to the pain, the suffering that everybody suffers on a daily basis. But that was a visual. That was a visual of doing it, going up the mountain with a weight on your shoulders, a weight on your back. It's almost the cross that people carry. For myself personally, from a starting point, I started at the time where I was starting to question my life choices and negative coping mechanisms that I was turning to cope with the pain. And then I go backwards and I look at why do I think in the way that I think? And why do I behave in the way that I behave? And in many times my thinking's the root cause of it, and the repetitive thinking loops that I'm stuck in causes me to act out in a certain way. So when I go right back to the start, I think things that I would now call traumatic events that happened in my life. My dad lost all his family in quite a quick succession of time. He lost his mum, my gran. He lost his brother who was murdered, and we lost my grandpa, who I was really close to at the time. And looking back now, I was probably too young to be able to process that. Like, the idea of death and infinity just boggles the young, underdeveloped mind. And I think going back to that time, I was probably quite obsessive thinking about things like that, about death, about loss, what I would now call loss, grief and bereavement. But I never knew about any of those things. It would come later in life as I tried to unpackage all of this stuff, what it was that I was experiencing. I know now through looking at that and speaking to other people that with loss, grief and bereavement comes secondary loss. And in that time, from my dad's point of view, he was no longer a son and he was no longer a brother. But for me and for my siblings, probably my mum, you also lose a part of him. So from a young age, I probably obsessed quite a lot about death, and I probably had a lot of what I would call now, or people can call, intrusive thoughts.
Right, okay. What age were you then, Paul?
So I would be at high school, and I think I was maybe second year at school, because I've got a vivid memory of coming down one of the corridors and having a thought about my uncle. So And I can't remember if before that I had like obsessive thought patterns like that. But I know after that I did, and still can do, like to this day and age. The only difference is my relationship with them, is I can view them as an intrusive thought, or even just a thought, because sometimes it doesn't help to like demonize the thought and tag it as bad. So I just view it as a thought, and I try and leave those thought patterns when I see them. But how it manifests in me is, it's a wee bit like final destination thinking.
Yep.
Like I can see the things before they happen, and it's all pretty much fear based, or it's worst case scenario thinking. So like in a situation where there's a knife or something, you're thinking in the worst possible case thing to happen there. But the thing is, with these thoughts, you're driving on a bridge. What would happen if I was just to turn off, or on the motorway driving at speed, central reservation? And the way I look at it now is, I don't kind of demonise the thought or myself, but at the time it was really hard to think there's something wrong with me, and there was something like there was a badness in me or something like that. So an inability to deal with those thoughts, and you're just ruminating on them. They're just going round and round. And then I think these thoughts as well can lead to negative behaviours, as I mentioned. Some of the thoughts based on like just your worth, self-worth. So thinking that you're worthless and looking out for evidence to suggest that you are.
So you actually were wanting to reinforce these beliefs that you were having about yourself, given the family events that had happened.
Aye, not consciously, but when I look back now at a subconscious level, that's what's happening. You've came up with an idea in your head that you're maybe no good enough, or that you're going to lose people, and with these thought patterns, like repeating, you end up subconsciously you play them out to that final destination. So you're thinking, I'm not good enough and everybody's going to leave me. You look for evidence to suggest that theory that your mind's came up with, and it's like selective. You're just selecting the evidence that supports your theory, and you're negating the evidence that suggests otherwise.
You're just waiting for constant backups
till you get to that final outcome. So, and you even if people were to tell you that you are worth something, you don't believe it, because it's an idea that you've came up with yourself, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I do. No, it does. It makes perfect sense. So were all these thoughts kind of as a result of losing your gran and granddad and your uncle at that point?
I think,
or had it been the effect that you'd seen it have on your dad, that he had lost his close family?
I think there's parts of that. It's multifaceted, so it's not just one thing, and I can't pinpoint just those events being the main contributors to it. They definitely played a part in it. I think I probably was quite like fear-based. When I was younger, maybe not so much, because I'd done things like climbing trees, and heights didn't really bother me, but it gets to this point where you're starting to have a wee bit more fears creeping in. And having a fear of height, for example. And I've looked at fears more closely, and I think underpinning quite a lot of the fears, because a fear of height is an irrational fear. Otherwise you would just be scared of lampposts. You'd be looking at that going, that's at height. But it's not, it's really, I'm scared of falling for height, and the end result of that, which is inevitably death. And I think once you start to strip back all the fears and look at the layers and the things that underpin them, that is really what's driving everybody. But it's not just a fear of death, it's maybe like a denial of death. And there's somebody that said that, like, that's what's driving society, is a denial of death. Everybody acts like it's a housebreaking. You know that it happens, but you think that it won't happen to you. And that in itself is a kind of paradox, because the fear of death can stop you from living. And I think in my own experience, that's kind of what happens. It's like you end up retreating almost and isolating. And all these things are common. I speak to people every day that are, and some people are able to be fearless in certain situations. Like, I find a lot of people are good at, like, say, maybe thrill-seeking things. and they feel fearless in those situations, but in everyday situations might bring about a lot of anxiety. It's social anxiety, and sometimes there's a freedom that comes from, like, say, climbing or being at height, and I think the freedom comes from you can be totally in that moment, and it almost takes away all the other thoughts and all the other feelings.
So take us kind of more, well, not more present, because you've been in the fire service for a long time, but not long after your school years, you applied and were successful and joined the fire brigade. Obviously, the nature of the job, you're going to deal with traumatic incidents, you're going to deal with fires, like road traffic collisions, etc. There's going to be a lot of stuff that you're forced to deal with. Were your own problems apparent to yourself before then, or do you think that the instance actually brought out other things that were more deep-rooted in your mind?
I think so. I think there's no idea or indication that those things have even affected me in a negative way. But when you start experiencing situations, you mentioned it, like you can go to incidents and ultimately things are out with your control. And you're witness to traumatic events, and you're witness to other people being witness to traumatic events, family members, and I think, maybe looking back now, I didn't have all the tools to deal with that, and I don't know if other people do. Some people seem to manage it better than others. Looking at these traumatic events, and you can be at incidents in person. I know, like, call handlers experience a thing called vicarious trauma. Speak to a lot of people who are in maybe the medical profession who it's like moral trauma, where they may want to help, but a policy or a procedure holds them back. There's no the money, there's no the resources, and these things create traumatic events. And I think it's like a ticking time bomb now in the country, with everything that we've just been through, COVID, things like that. So it comes in all different shapes and sizes. For me personally, I would say I was at incidents and I went away and they played on my mind and revisited them, and again going back to that obsessive compulsive way of thinking.
So would you analyse an incident and almost break it down like obsessively? I would
analyse it and overanalyse it and try and do a thing now which I know to be cleaning. It's trying to change the outcome of the event. And you can do that with anything in your life. Revisit events that weren't favourable or weren't kind for yourself or for somebody else, and you can go back and I would have done this different if only they could have done things different. And there's a cycle that comes with grief. I think it was actually originally designed for people that were dying, but if you've experienced traumatic incidents, you can use it as well. And I think the very first stage is denial, to deny that something bad's happening. And you can see that in people that experience traumatic incidents. They can sometimes try and normalise it by saying something really, really unrelated, like, oh, well, this can't be happening, I need to get back to the house and I need to do this housework or this chore. And they're trying to deny the reality of the situation and trying to escape it.
Is that a natural coping mechanism, Paul, isn't it? Just your guard's up straight away, and if you don't think about it, it might not have happened actually.
It is. Like, I think all these things are natural coping mechanisms, including if you have experienced traumatic events, you can be in a state of hypervigilance, and I'd say I'm still like that. If I go to things, I was at something recently with Emma and the kids, and there was a lot of people there, and I'm trying to analyse and see if there's a threat to me within that. But it goes further than that. I'm trying to pre-plan what I would do if a threat appeared, which it could be handy if that threat does occur, but it's almost 100% never occurred. And it's quite draining if you're always thinking like that,
because it takes you out of the present moment. You're not there enjoying whatever it might have been in that situation with your family, because you're busy thinking of a situation that, like you said, is 99.9% certain not to happen. And are these situations all like human related? Is it like, or there's people over there, he might do this or this might happen, or can it just be like the environment? Is it to do with fire? Is it to do with like a natural disaster? Is it?
No, it wouldn't really be
a fear of people as such.
It is a fear of people, which is quite difficult. It's a fear of people and places that I don't have enough evidence on to suggest that they're not going to cause me harm.
Right, okay.
So somebody explained it to me, and if you take a rat out of its cage, its environment, it'll go around and it'll sniff all four corners to see if there's any danger present, and it'll continue to do that until it's got enough evidence to suggest there's nothing in there that's going to cause it harm. And I can feel a bit like that if I'm new people or new places. I need to build up enough evidence to suggest that they're not going to cause me any harm.
Right, okay. And where's that mistrust of people came from?
I don't know if it's came from people in general or if it's just, as you said, a defence mechanism.
Right, okay. That's interesting. No, it is, I mean, it must be... I didn't realise it was as deep-rooted as that because, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're out with your family and you're obviously being protective of yourself and your family there. You're assessing for any kind of dangers in that situation, but it also stops you from enjoying your life to that point as well, because you're not in that moment where you can just feel relaxed and just experience whatever it is that you're out to experience. It must be pretty draining. Do you get frustrated with yourself regarding it?
I think just now I can identify when I'm doing it and I can leave it a lot quicker than I ever could. Right. And that's all I've got to do. I'm not an expert in psychology or anything like that, but I've got a basic level of awareness of my thinking and where my thinking's going. But it does separate you from the present moment, and there is times when I need to tell myself that I'm not actually enjoying it, I'm not experiencing it. If I can find myself doing that, then I can leave it. But as you said earlier, sometimes when you go to certain places, you'll hear noises and stuff like that. And sometimes like noises can be quite... I can give myself a fright just making a cup of tea and put the drawer in too quick.
So are they noises? Can you relate the noises to specific incidents?
I can't. I mean, like if I say we were in a fire, you can have low visibility and your senses are heightened and you will hear everything, you will hear a lot of noises, but I can't pinpoint them to a specific incident. I just know that noises can make me can overwhelm me, can be quite sensitive to them at times.
And would you label that as a form of PTSD?
Possibly. I mean, when I found myself in this situation, I went to the doctors and these things were suggested and I got medication for it. At the time, I got medication for different types of depression and I used them for a period of time. I don't take any now. I don't have an opinion that medication's good or bad. I think it's definitely good for a period of time. For myself, I never wanted to be reliant on it like long term sustainably. I wanted to use that to help me get the clear headspace and then to build on that and develop kind of natural coping mechanisms. And that's not to speak negatively against medication. I know that it's helpful and it's helpful to so many people, but it was just my own personal view of what I wanted to do. The same with the tags like depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which from my understanding is just like more than one traumatic event. I found all the information within them helpful, but I didn't want to get like trapped within them. It wasn't like a shame-based thing where I felt if I view myself as depressed or anxious, that was a bad thing. I think there is like a stigma, and everybody talks about the negative stigma for society. I think a lot of the stigma initially comes like internally. Well, if I'm this, how will people receive me or how will people perceive me? And that was a part of it, especially with the job that I'm doing, is people could have a negative opinion of me and think maybe I was untrustworthy if I had these kind of symptoms. And
do you think if you're labellised or given the label of having a depression or PTSD or anxiety and you accept that label, do you find that then makes it more difficult to escape from it?
I think you need to accept it first and foremost, but to know that you can also transcend it. So I didn't want to accept it. I wanted to accept it and I didn't want to stay there. I wanted to say like, well, how can I move out of there? Right, okay. And I would still say at periods of time I could like if I don't deal with emotions and feelings, and I don't allow myself to feel sadness, then I could go into depression. If I'm not dealing with feelings and emotions, and I'm not dealing with things that might pass up from my past, I can experience high levels of anxiety. Right. So I just use the feelings and emotions as they come in to almost decipher the information that's within them. And I think that came from myself as well. Like we always talk about positive mental health, but how can you think positively if all the things that are coming into your stream of consciousness is negative?
Yeah, of course.
And then you will label yourself as a negative person. So kind of not demonising the thoughts as much. I find that a lot of the emotions that I used to term as negative are some of the most helpful emotions to me.
Because you've split them up, and you've dissected them, and you've worked with them, as opposed to just like being defined by them almost.
Yeah, well, it's like if you delay sadness, I think there's a real chance that'll turn into like anger or depression. So you almost need to invite it in, and it's counterintuitive. But if you try and replace that sadness with a positive thought, it might work temporarily, but it's coming back. It's coming back. So I think, as uncomfortable as it is today, when I'm feeling these negative thoughts, I kind of invite them in and put the kettle on and sit with them for a wee while and allow
them,
that.
Give them a wee cuddle and deal with it, and then send them on their way. That's almost
what they're needing. And some of them are like bits of me as a scared child, and that bit needs that does need an arm around it rather than demonising it. And I think it'll turn into anything like addiction, the negative coping mechanisms that you might lean on during these times, and then that might bring with it its own problems, because these things are great, like alcohol, drugs, gambling, which I have experience of, will give you a level of escapism from these uncomfortable thoughts and feelings, but again, it's coming back.
No, it's not dealing with it.
No, it's not dealing with it. It's suspending it.
Yeah.
And
so did the addictions that you spoke of, and each of them you've experienced, did they begin like before the fire service, or did they begin once you joined and they were used as a coping mechanism, not only to deal with maybe long-standing problems that were from your kind of childhood to an extent, but also the traumatic experiences that you were having within the fire service? Or do you think you went into the fire service with addictions as well?
Yeah, I would say I did. As I think I'm quite compulsive and quite an addictive person in general. And growing up, I had things like football and boxing. I focused a lot of energy and attention. My dad, he did as well. He took me a lot of these places, and he had a lot of he done a lot for me in that respect. And maybe when I didn't have them, subconsciously started replacing them with other things that were giving me similar feelings. And I think with anybody, the alcohol, drugs, gambling, it never presents as something that's going to be a problem. It's just something that's going to give you a good short term kind of fix, if you like. But then if you are obsessive, you are addictive, then they're going to cause their own problems. And I still go back to the thinking, because I think addiction is universal in the way that everybody's an addict, and they might not be comfortable with that language, but even people that it's not manifested into external things with substances, the thought pattern for me was the first addiction, being addicted to the same looped thought patterns.
Right, okay.
And then the external things like substances, liquids, they're just a manifestation of that. So I'm just going to obsess about them, and it's also going to give me an out to the obsessive thinking that I'm having.
Yep.
And it doesn't matter if that obsessive thoughts about taking drugs, the obsessive thinking that I'm having about maybe negative things that have happened in the past, the out to them is going to be this alcohol or something, because it's a quick release.
Yeah.
And alcohol and drugs are easy to see that, because they're physical substances that you can touch. But I could be addicted to gambling, online shopping,
just anything that can take your attention.
And those are a bit more difficult for people to understand, because you can't physically reach out and touch that a betting app.
I think that it's easier to understand with like drinking drugs, because those substances contain chemicals that are addictive on the human body. But with people with addictions, correct me if I'm wrong, that they're addicted to the feeling as well, not just the chemicals. You know, they're addicted to the feeling of possibly winning money for gambling, or buying new things for online shopping, or we talked about food addiction and stuff as well. They're addicted to the food. Whereas it's easier to see when it's drinking drugs, but the kind of less common ones, I can still understand how they would be problematic for sure.
And I think there's different addictions in there within it, and some people might not be happy with the term addiction, or again think it's got negative connotations, which it can do. But I think there's other addictions, like the addiction to feeling bad. It comes back to that idea that you have of yourself, that you're not good enough, that you don't deserve good things, because addictions are going to allow you to feel that again. And then you can turn around, or there's a part of your mind, maybe the ego, that can turn around and say, see, I told you, you're no good. And again, it's reinforcing that to you. But the more it reinforces that to you, the more you're going to lean into that.
Yeah, and the more
because it's the only thing that's taking that away. And like with the gambling as well, there's that. There could be that addiction to chaos within me, that I actually feel a bit more comfortable and a bit more familiar with a chaotic environment.
Yeah.
Which is strange, again, counterintuitive, but why do I feel more comfortable in a chaotic environment? Maybe because it's what I'm familiar to. And the peaceful stuff doesn't feel real to me, and it doesn't feel like it's my default place to exist.
Yeah, it's not.
So I want to go back to the chaotic quite quickly. Yeah. And gambling will give you that, because you don't know what you're doing at 5:30 on a Saturday night. You don't know if you're going to be going out for a nice meal, or you don't know if you're going to be texting family members asking them if they can tap you 20 quid. Yeah. And as funny as that sounds, it's like it's a really hard place to exist. And it's like a silent place to exist. And you'll get the selective bias of being able to tell people when you get a big win up, but you can't tell them about the stuff that you're doing in the darkness and behind closed doors. And that's almost the same with every addiction. There's a shame that comes with it. And it's like, if people only knew about me and what I was really like, they would abandon me. And again, that's another fear, which I think drives everything, is everybody wants to be accepted. And on the flip side of that is nobody wants to be rejected. And whether that's based on childhood experiences or whatever, I think it's a massive fear that people have as a collective, and probably at a subconscious level driving a lot of people. I just got to find out about myself.
I know, definitely. I think there's a fear of rejection in anyway, and that's why everybody, I mean, you do get some people that like to stand out, but that's why the kind of natural default for humans is to blend in, to fit into society, is to be accepted. They don't want to stand out and be classed as not normal, whatever that means nowadays. But there is a massive fear of rejection there. Do you think, what kind of effect did your addictions and your problems that you were going through in that time have on those close around you? Was it obvious to them, relationship wise, friends and family wise, or did you kind of do the classic, like, just hide it for everyone?
Yeah.
Successfully?
I would say successfully to a certain point, but if you are at that level, there's going to be visible signs of that. Yeah. When it comes to personal relationships, it would be more hide it or not be completely honest about that, which it's not successful it's not a good foundation for any successful relationship, because you might still be being faithful in terms of you're not seeing anybody else, but you're being unfaithful because of the lies that you're telling to cover and protect your addictions. And it is a bit like Stockholm syndrome, because the addictions are causing you the problem, but you will protect them. And you can even, I came up with clever solutions to separate my mental health from my addiction. So I never viewed like taking alcohol or drugs, I never viewed them as having a negative impact on my mental health, believe it or not.
Really?
You know, I thought I was taking them because that helped me, which it did to a certain point of view, but I couldn't see how that was making my mental health worse in the long run.
Just totally separated you two.
And again, it was just a protective measure, because I didn't want to didn't want to give that up, and I didn't want to feel all the feelings and emotions, just the human condition. That seems to be the stuff that I've been avoiding, and the idea of facing all those feelings and emotions without any alcohol, drugs, gambling really filled me with fear. And I think it's a really hard thing for anybody that's trying to get off alcohol, any negative coping mechanisms they may have came up with, is the idea of feeling thoughts and emotions without being able to have this crutch to lean on. Really is quite, it gives you a lot of fear. But it's a necessary part of it. And the process with any change and transformational changes, you have a place of order and you're going to go into disorder before there's reorder. Right. And you really need to, you're in no man's land in the disorder. You're in the jungle, the desert, however you want to view it. And there's always going to be that thing in your mind saying, just go back the way you came. Yeah. It's not good, but you'll still have familiarity. You'll know what's going to happen there. Whereas I don't know what's up ahead. It's just black and the unknown. Yeah. And
do you think that's the stage that a lot of people just can't push themselves towards?
I think it's...
Or they keep coming back from?
I think you will get chased right back into that.
Yeah.
And there's a guy, Joseph Campbell, that talks about it a lot better than me, and his is the hero's journey. Right. And this is all like medieval spirituality that you'll be familiar with. Jordan Peterson talks about it a lot. Right. You leave your village and you take a path. If there's a path already there, it's not your path. Mm-hmm. You go to the dragon's lair and you slay the dragon. But that would be incomplete unless you return to the village to tell them how you slayed the dragon. Mm-hmm. And it's the challenges that you're doing. That's why people can they can notice that, because you need to give people a visual description sometimes. Myself, I'm a visual learner, so you need to give them a visual description of what it is that they're doing. They know everybody that watched that is going to go put 100 kilograms in their back and climb a mountain. Mm-hmm. But they've got their own mountain that they're going to climb, and they've got their own 100 kilogram and all the pain and the suffering and the traumatic events.
That's totally symbolic.
And it's learning how to carry that. And this is what I try and do today. I'm not calling myself, or I'm not calling us heroes, right?
No, of course.
but what I'm saying is, if you overcome something, you can return to the village and you can tell people how you done it.
Yeah, totally.
And that is going to be a bit of a map for them, and it might be a different challenge that they're facing in their own life, but they can take that information and they can use it to overcome. And I think that's why it's important to continue to talk about
things like this. No, definitely. I think you're totally right. I mean, even for me with the podcast, this would never have came had people not supported me during the training and challenge for it. People that got back in touch with, reconnected with you like yourself. I learned so much, and it totally changed my kind of outlook on life and people as general, because I had quite a negative view of the world, basically, and people. But then when I got to speak to folk that had motor neuron disease, people that had other both mental and physical illnesses as well, you realise like there's a lot of good in the world, do you know, and people need to kind of celebrate that, as opposed to, it's a natural human instinct to focus on the negatives. Whereas if you can try and push yourself, learn from what you've achieved. The same with your recovery. You're now speaking on a podcast like this, and you're doing a lot more than this, which was what we're about to get on to. See if it helps a few people along the way, then it's worthwhile. One thing that I wanted when we were talking off camera was last night, actually, going back to when you were in the fire service, it kind of stuck out the distinct lack of support after dealing with traumatic incidents, and you would be asked to fill in a debrief form, and totally credit to you for being, usually these forms are either not completed or you lie on them as far as how things have affected. But you were open enough to say that actually that instance really affected me to the point where I'm having suicidal thoughts. I'm really struggling with the flashbacks of these incidents. You were submitting them and there was just no feedback, nothing, no one ever made contact.
So I think, not to criticise the fire service.
No, of course.
They obviously there's traumatic incidents and fatalities happening all the time. What we had was a system where you were contacted after a set period of time, because it was maybe, I don't know if optimum time's the right word, but it would be when people were most experiencing traumatic symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. The forms are sent out in a way that it's confidential, so that it maybe makes it easier to reply. And my own personal experience was I would be putting on them some of the symptoms that people with post-traumatic stress disorder could be experiencing, and nothing came back to me. There was no support came back to me. Even at the time of filling that in, it sounds really strange because it's just me in a room on my own filling in those forms, but like every fibre of my being's saying just lie.
Just say you're okay.
Just lie and say that you're okay. And I think the way those forms or that are designed is to have that confidentiality so that you're not actually having to approach a person. That was my understanding of it. And then so I had to just self-refer. I had to have a real discussion with myself and say, I'm just going to tell somebody. I'm going to tell my line manager that I'm struggling with this kind of stuff, because the help hadn't came forward. And it's, as I say, it's not to criticise the service in any way. I think a lot of institutions and organisations can be really great at getting on board with mental health campaigns and stuff like that, and they can promote, like, we support our staff and stuff like that, but it's when people say that they are experiencing this and that they're in this place, what physical support actually arrives, and do you have to fight for it? Because if you do, then you might not think that you're worth it. If you're in a poor mental state and you're feeling worthless, you might not think that you're worthy of that support as well. So you might not push that yourself.
You might not have the fight in you either.
Aye.
Do you know?
And I think just like for emergency services, for example, if we are going with this tagline that mental health, mental illness is as important as physical health and physical illness, then we probably need to back it up.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's the part that I'd say, and it's a great opportunity for organisations to say we're going to be the people that do this, and we're going to make mental health, we're going to make that mandatory and no kind of optional, no opt-in. So almost we'll give you a mental health checkup, and if you want, you can opt out of that. And it might catch a bit more people, and it might not even be for traumatic events that have happened within the time you've been with that employer. It might be traumatic events that you've been carrying from before that employer, but you've still got a duty of care to people. And surely you would want to look after your staff. It's going to be a better result for you. It's going to be a better result for the community, for any service users.
No, I think that's the important thing. Like what you said, you hit the nail on the head there. When you see a lot of businesses making promises about this, that, and the next thing, and sometimes you think it's just advertising to boost the kind of public perception of whatever business or emergency service or public body it is. But they need to be able to back up. And when you've got firemen like yourself, firefighters coming up and saying, "Look, I'm experiencing suicidal thoughts because this, that, and the next thing," for those issues to be raised and then ignored, it just shows you how much work has to be done there to support them. And that, again, I'm just using yours as an example, but it will happen throughout loads of businesses as well, and other emergency services too. At what point did the penny kind of drop with you and you realised, fuck, Paul, you have got a problem here, get it sorted? Like, reach out and try and get help.
So the turning point in my story, and it's not to talk away from myself, but it actually came with my brother. And when this happened and it became a part of my story, because they're just intrinsically linked, I asked him if I could speak about that as well, because what happened was Ryan had a serious attempt on his life, and to see the kind of pain and devastation that was causing to my family, and not knowing at that time if he was going to make it or not, and being in the hospital ward, and it's just, you know, those kind of situations that you're in with the family, is there's like no words that you can say or that anybody else can say that's going to offer you any consolation. So that was like it was almost like, you know, the Ghost of the Christmas Past showing you your future, and I was like, see all the thoughts that you've been having recently about not being wanting to be here, and like, I do think a part of me at that time, as an overthinker and an overanalyzer, I thought about the effects that this would have as well, to the point where I used to think about accidental ways that I could die, or die so that people could perceive it as an accident. And I know now as well, like, there's suicidal thoughts and there's passive suicidal thoughts that you hear quite often, like, I wish if I didn't wake up, I wouldn't care, like things like that. So
Excuse me.
I had spent a lot of time thinking about this in all different kind of situations. But what I got in that moment was, it was like the ghost of Christmas past showing me this would be the future if that is something that you would want to do.
Yeah.
And seeing that the pain and the devastation on my family, I knew that it wasn't where I wanted to be, and I wanted Ryan to get better, and I wanted to be a better example to him. And I always say to people, you need any kind of change that's going to happen, you need to do for yourself. And I did, but that was a great incentive that I wanted to be a better example to my brother, because I was an older sibling. You're meant to show people how to live, and I always wanted to be that. I just, as I said, I never had the tools, and it was then about going about finding the tools. Like, what do I do? Is there any organisations that will help me get better? And it turns out there was. There's loads of organisations, but 12-step fellowships, which I'll just speak about and mention in a general way. Yeah. And if people need to find them for alcohol, drugs, gambling, I've been to meetings with eating, sugar. There's something out there to help you for everything that you've got, and you just need to go. And there's a bit of surrender in there, saying, that pride that you've got yourself, I'll get myself out of this, I'll be fine, I'll get on with it. You almost need to put that aside, and there's a bit of surrender there to say, I might need a bit of external help and support, and I might need some scaffolding around about me until I get better. And it's a slow process. I mentioned earlier, I was the order, disorder and reorder. You're in that disorder for a huge period of time, and it's going to be like walking your mountain, one step after another, and that's it. You break it down into bite-sized pieces and make it manageable and make it achievable, and you just start doing the right things. I'm going to do the right things today. I'm going to wake up tomorrow, try and do the same tomorrow, and just build on that. But the success does become accumulative. So that was it. That was a turning point. And
how long ago was that now?
I'd say that would be, I've been going to meetings for about 5 years. Right, okay. And in July there, I celebrated 4 years free. So
brilliant.
That's thanks. And you mentioned about people that care for you, and I caused trauma. Like, I'm aware of that. I'm speaking about trauma, but in that state, you cause trauma, and I'm not making any excuses for it at all. You've got to take ownership, and you've got to try and make amends in whatever way you can. But to make amends for me as well is sometimes, it's not about visiting people and saying, look at me, I'm well now. It's like about doing the right things on a daily basis and not causing that harm in the future. I heard somebody mention about pain, like you see it in superhero movies. Like, often the goodie and the baddie have experienced pain, and the difference is the goodies, they've found a way of transforming the pain.
Or they've channeled it in the right way.
They've channeled it, and they've transformed that pain, because if you don't, you'll just continue to hurt and cut people. So
you'll just like, weaponise your anger almost, you'll turn that.
Definitely.
I mean, anger's a great emotion, it's an amazing emotion that gets you through so much at times. When you can be in that moment, it's good to get angry, but you can't weaponise it. You need to channel that aggression in the right way. So you're 4 years free of your
alcohol, any mind and mood altering substances.
Brilliant. How do you feel? Do you feel best you have felt in a long time?
I feel great.
Good. And do you feel you've still got work to do?
Oh, every day.
Is it still a kind of fight? Do you need to?
Not in like the alcohol or mind and mood altering substances, but I feel like I've got work to do and being a human and dealing with the human condition, and that's where I struggle the most. I've got an amazing family. Emma, Finlay and Fia, and like being in the home and just adapting to that is where I struggle the most. I can go to meetings and support groups, and I feel like that's fine. I can operate there quite easily. I need a wee bit harder work at being a family, and like, I'm not the main kind of, you need to be selfless, and there's an element of sacrifice, and I'm just learning all of that stuff, and Emma still does more than me, and I annoy her at times, but I'm just trying to pick up wee bits where I
just learn how
can,
to
do
cope.
like that. So the work for me is just on the human condition and the awareness. I'm constantly trying to find ways of bringing my awareness up, because then I can identify the thinking that leads me into these kind of negative behaviours.
And do you think, Paul, that you still have that kind of mistrust of people, or is your barriers coming down a little more now?
I would say I still have that. It's I can see the truth in it a bit more when it's happening.
Yep.
But if I get told I'm going to a place to work a new shift and it's a station that I've not been to and it's a watch that I'm not familiar with, I'm still thinking, I don't know anybody on this shift, I don't know what.
Yeah,
And that seems quite strange and quite alien to people. And again, there's that element, I mentioned it earlier, there's that element of, with the danger that they're going to pose you, it's like part of that anxiety is, are these people going to accept me or not? And that's a conversation I have with myself more and more now, is if I'm going somewhere, say I was going to a new fire station and I was going to be doing like a presentation, or you're going to be doing a bit of training, there's this part of my mind that's thinking, like, what if they don't accept you? And I can replace it the day with, do you accept you? And that's
Does that
great.
work for you?
It works for me, aye. And a lot of the time that's what I'm doing. I'm replacing a lot of these old thinking patterns with new. And that's just challenging it and replacing it with like a kind of new mantra. Yeah. But there was a time when I didn't accept me. So it helps the day and everything that I'm doing that I kind of accept myself and all my past. And it's like radical acceptance. If I can accept myself, if I can accept my past, if I can accept everything that's happening in reality of the day, and it goes against what I was talking about earlier with the traumatic events, being in denial, because I was in a constant state of denial about a lot of things that had happened and I couldn't move on. So I never really went through all the stages, and I might not get this right, but there's like denial, there's bargaining, and the bargaining is, if I had done this, if only this person had done that, it would have had a different outcome. And there's anger, and there was a lot of that directed towards myself for certain things, directed towards other people, and then you move on to kind of like depression and all these kind of, because the final thing is acceptance, and that's the thing that I wasn't willing to get on a lot of things, because there was a part of my mind that thought, if I accept this, then I'm saying that this thing was all right that happened, and it's not to say that it was a good thing or a bad thing, it's just to say that this was a thing, and I'm going to leave it there as a thing, and that's to not reject reality, to accept reality, and then I'm able to move on for it. Okay. And I've found that that's kind of been the path that I've walked with things that happened in the past, or with things that may happen in the present. And I've found that being able to do that with the stuff in the past, one, has allowed me to be more present, how we were speaking about, but two, it allows me to walk that path with things that come up, something that might happen in the present moment. I'm able to walk that path, and I'm almost able to walk it quicker because I've done it now. It doesn't mean that I'm never going to be sad, or I'm never going to be in all of these things. I definitely can, and I'll allow myself to be in it, but I'll kind of like assign myself time for that, to feel that way, and then I'll say, right, now I'm going to do something about this. I'm quite like that with my weight. It's a constant battle I've had with eating, and it's just one of the crutches that I've always had and that I've been able to do. I'll just take back control. If I'm feeling out with control in a situation, it's like, it's nothing that a packet of chocolate eclairs will not sort out. But I do all that in secret. As well, like all the other things. And it's my relationship with food that's a damaging thing, which is a lot harder than the other stuff, because I can just avoid going to pubs and stuff like that, but it's a lot harder when it comes to avoiding eating food, especially where everywhere you go, people want to give you food and they want to give you seconds, and food's like a love language in Scotland, and if you eat seconds, you'll be assessed on how well you eat at somebody's house, and your mum will say that he can come back again and eat all his dinner.
He's a nice guy.
He's a nice guy. He ate all his dinner and he had seconds.
No, I totally understand that. No, I'd like to, I think that I don't want the podcast to be defined by your addictions, because that's not defined your life, Paul. Do you know, there's a lot more to you than someone that was addicted to these substances and the gambling, etc. as well. But you've done a lot of work in the community, the local community, for people with any addictions and mental health illnesses. You were the kind of founder of a group called Max Colby, which is based in the Falkirk, Stirling area, and it's a group that takes other people that have experienced these similar difficulties out into the hills, cold water therapy, brings everybody together where they maybe don't feel alienated like they maybe would do joining a club where it's a different kind of mix of people? How did that start, and how's that kind of developed? Because it's a big group now.
Well, it started with me getting a wee bit further on with my own personal journey and thinking, right, well, there's something here where you've got this experience of overcoming stuff and you could use it to help others. And you get the opportunity to do that in the fellowship groups that I mentioned earlier as well. This was just an idea not to rival or compete against that, because it can't really compete against the good that they do. But it was an idea of a different kind of space, a different idea that could almost complement that. So if somebody is trying to get off alcohol or something like that, these things can all run parallel with each other. Like, they don't need to conflict. And I think in my own experience, if you've got, like, I hate the word holistic, right? Because wellness has become an industry now as well, and it's quite a toxic industry at times. But I'm going to use it, right? So I think if you get a holistic approach to your recovery, no matter if it's mental health, addiction, you're trying to overcome trauma, whatever it is, if you get a holistic approach that says, I'm going to take as much healthy connections that's available to me as possible. I'm going to do this meeting, I'm going to do that, I'm going to get myself in my comfort zone, I'm going to meet new people in new groups. It's mostly based in nature, which I think is a great environment to heal. Totally. Speaking about that fear of people and places, I just feel a lot more comfortable walking in the house than I do in a building with 4 walls.
Oh, totally.
I don't feel as trapped. I feel like there's a lot more getaway places if I need to do a wee duck dive into
if there's danger, then I can jump in the river or hide in the forest.
So that was the idea, based in nature. I wanted it to be all inclusive, so not just people confined to one addiction or addiction in itself, but mental health, mental illness, trauma survivors, putting people together, and people using their experience to help other people. And some people have came to the group and says, like, there's this, some people have said to me, like, am I allowed to come? And I'm like, everybody's allowed to come. And they're like, but do I need to, like, identify as a certain thing? And I'm like, no, that's the beauty of it. And a lot of people come, and I've done walks in water, and they find out over a period of time why they're actually there. And I think it's in nature, and it has to be like a natural process. We're not going to meet you at the car park and get you to fill in a form saying, do you check this? But sorry, you need to go back. You need to go back up the road. You're not addicted enough. So it's like, and if you find yourself there, then you're obviously looking for, whether that's connection, whether it's a sense of belonging and acceptance.
It should be like-minded people, do you know?
And I find, like, often it's too late, but see if you can be proactive about mental health, it's the best time to do it, because while you've got that solid foundation there, you can learn healthy coping mechanisms. If you've not got them and something traumatic happens in your life, you can find that you're too deep and it's a bigger hole to get out.
Oh, so so people can use that as almost like a protective issue.
Definitely, it's the best time to build that resilience. Like, remember resilience, that's what you're talking about. And the hill walking, if people have got social anxiety, the hill walking the cold water is not their biggest challenge. It's meeting new people, because they're going to think the same way that I am. I don't know this guy, he could really pose me a threat or danger, or people within the group might, and it might take them a wee while to let their guards down. To people that don't have social anxiety and that are alright with people, then maybe the hill walk's their biggest challenge, because they're a bit unfit. The cold water might be their biggest challenge, and they're going to stand at the water with all the self-doubt that you had when you done your challenge, and it's maybe not as big as your challenge, but to them it's like that might be the biggest thing that they've ever checked off. And just the idea that they might have that self-doubt in their cell, and they might have those self-limiting beliefs and saying, you can't do this, or they'll say to you, I can't do this, and then they do it, and then it's like they've broke that. There's no ceiling to that. It's like you're telling yourself you can't do this, and you've just went and done it. What else are you saying that way?
Then move on to the next thing that you say you can't do. No, it looks amazing, and I'd like to join you on. Maybe not next day, I don't know what the dates are, but certainly if I can tick enough boxes.
Not you qualify.
On your questionnaire in the car.
I've psychoanalyzed you. You pass.
I did get a wee free pass. No, honestly, it's brilliant. I love what you are doing, and I actually love when I look at the pictures and the videos online. The mix of people that are there is male and females of all ages, shapes, sizes. You know, it just seems like it really is a kind of a really welcome kind of proactive place for people to heal from certain stuff, but like you say, also build up their layers of protection so that if something happens in the future, then they know that they can deal with certain issues. Plus, they've now got a support group round about them that they can bounce off as well. So it's a massive thing. You should be totally proud of yourself for starting that, because it has. I think I looked on your Facebook or Instagram. There's like 5,000 people that follow that page. It's a big deal. It must be hard to manage, though, is it not?
So it's not just me, and although I was the founder, and initially it never had this shape, it was just me speaking about my own experience.
Right,
but people have came in, and the people that have came in are able to facilitate things now as well,
take a wee bit of back
and they bring with it like their own kind of interests or whatever you like, and then they can put a bit of their spin on it and stuff like that as well, which is good. Like, we've not just been confined to the hill and the water. We've done exercise stuff before. We've done like exercise nights, which is, again, like, once you start doing that in the darkness and people don't know the route, they're like, it finds a wee bit within them that totally. and it builds them up. But I think, like with any group, is I don't want it to be a place where people come and get stuck. I want them to come and find it valuable. And like, the people around about you be the scaffolding to build you up and support you. But ultimately, you're going to get that confidence yourself. And I think it should be empowering. You should be letting people know that they're the ones with the power. It's not the group, because otherwise you're taking the power back off them.
No, I understand.
Like, and you're saying like, right, well, you need to come here every week now, and it's like job security.
No, you're providing that platform there should people wish to do it, but then it's up to themselves to turn up, to get into the water, to go up to the hill, to push themselves. Because you're doing charity work and stuff as well.
We have, and that's something that I was going to speak to you about, being Falkirk and the Scott Martin Foundation the last 2 years in Hogmanay. The first year we walked from Glasgow to Grangemouth at night. Last year we done a dip at midnight, and the Scott Martin Foundation do loads of work with the youth in the Falkirk area, but not just that, they're like, for me, they're just inspirational. Sam, Andrew and Scott's family, because it's like we spoke about earlier, like they've able to take something that happened in their life, Scott's passing, and just turn it into something really good that brings loads of value to people in the community and further afield. So that's something that's important to us as a group, and we'll be doing something again this Hogmanay, and we're just I want to speak to them as well and find out something.
Tell us what is who, because I wasn't familiar with the charity and the listeners might not be as well. So what was it set up? What happened?
Scott took his own life and was in the kind of mental health system, if you like, and just with delays and on waiting lists and stuff like that, and similar to what I've spoken about with other people, and they found that when they needed the help, it wasn't there and it wasn't forthcoming, and while he was waiting on these waiting lists and stuff like that, it sadly took his own life.
And he was a really promising boxer, is that right?
He was a boxer, football player, he was a athlete. Champion at Sparta boxing.
Right.
So
what age was he?
He was, I'm sure he was 16.
As young as that. So his family set up the foundation in his memory just to promote and help people with similar struggles to him, basically.
And they do work in the schools, including the school that we went to. Like, I've been in there myself and seen some of the programmes that are set up, and it's good to know that they are talking to kids, because what can happen with that is like his friends then become they're then left with that hole and not being able to deal with, like I spoke about earlier, to deal with that level of like loss, grief and bereavement at that age when you're like underdeveloped. So they're getting in these places and they're talking to the kids that are directly affected by these events and other traumatic events, and that'll give them some of the tools, or maybe just an outlet to know where to go to if they're experiencing this.
No, it sounds a totally worthwhile charity, and definitely if you're getting involved in stuff, then make sure I know about it, and I'll do my best to attend and promote it as much as I can. We'll start to bring the podcast to a kind of conclusion now, but I'm conscious, like, you've used a lot of different tools and techniques to get over the struggles and continue to go over the struggles that you're faced with. Like, where have you found the kind of the most success in your kind of healing journey, I feel like?
I use nature as my place. That's my place that I go to heal. And I find that when I go into the hills or when I go into the water, we do group events. Like more and more recently, I do a lot of my own solo stuff.
Right, good.
And it's when I'm on my own, that's when I feel like, I don't know if it's clarity that I receive, but I'm sometimes able to unpackage and process stuff. If it's present stuff, if it's past stuff, and it becomes a bit clearer. So definitely for hills, for the water, I think it runs parallel with doing stuff like meditating, listening to other people. Like I dived right into the saints and the mystics. I would probably describe myself as being violently anti-religious, and it was a prejudice and a thinking that I had to break down myself. And I came really close to just like reading about different religions, different kind of spiritual teachers, and what I was picking up and listening to was like the perennial truth. It's like a golden thready truth that runs through something that they're all saying in different ways, which just gave me a bit of reassurance. So it's like TED Talks for the ancient times. Some of the stuff that these folk are talking about.
People have struggled for thousands of years.
It's universal.
And it's common. Everybody's the same, really. Do you know? You're right. It is universal. What would you, knowing like the age you are now, which is mid-30s, what would you tell a younger version of yourself now?
So I've had this question. I've never been asked this question, but I've had it in my mind.
Right.
And it's like I've wasted a lot of energy going back and trying to fix things and do things differently. And I would probably tell myself, just hold tight, everything's going to be all right.
Just keep going.
And it's that idea, it's like the butterfly effect. If I was to go back and do one thing differently, it wouldn't be the same today.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have all the miracles that I have in my life today. So it's like, just hold tight, everything's going to be all right. And I believe that it was like the downward falling was the gift. There was a mystic, Julian of Norwich, and she said, first there is the fall, then there is the recovery of the fall, and both for the grace of God. And I can see that now. I can be grateful for the powerlessness and the downward spiral that I went on, because it was where I found the power and the strength. And that might seem, again, it's a paradox of life and it's counterintuitive, but sometimes the biggest thing that you're going to overcome, that'll end up being your power and your strength. And then you can speak about it and then you can help others as well. So in a way, that's your gift. So I would go back, and as controversial as it may sound, or maybe to people who would do things different, it might sound a bit strange, but it would be, hold tight, everything's going to be all right.
It's going to be all right. And last question, so many years from now, people look back on your life, or you look back on your life, what if you could be remembered for one thing, what would it be?
I used to worry about this, about how I would be viewed, and as I said, being obsessed with death, I pictured my funeral quite a lot of times. Really? I would always be upset at the people that never came to it. And I used to worry that in your life you might just fade into like pale insignificance. And I'm thinking more and more recently, I get joy out of doing the kind of mundane and everyday things. And my biggest achievement so far is my family and my family life. And I still have these fleeting fantasies going and doing my own challenges, and I've got this idea in my head, a visualisation that I always get myself, and I'll keep it a secret in case it happens.
We'll make that happen, definitely.
And I was talking to Emma earlier, and I says, do you know, if I did do that, I would do it anonymously, because I'm just getting at a stage where I can feel a valuation of myself with other people, and it's something that I hold quite important. And I've always been mindful. When I started Max Colby, I wanted to remain anonymous, and it never happened, because people that wanted to unveil me. It's like Scooby-Doo, they wanted to take the mask off and see who was there. So I have wee fantasies of wanting to do these challenges, but my relationship with them would be that it wouldn't be because I need to watch myself. Like I look for validation from you to find out that I'm alright. And the day what I'm trying to generate is this feeling within myself that I'm alright and I'm able to do it. And that's, for me, that's a golden ticket.
That's a massive thing.
So I think if I'm going to be remembered for anything, it'll be anonymously doing challenges. No.
You'll be like the stink of physical challenge. You'll be this guy.
It would be for my family, I think, in that life. And I mean, the charitable stuff or being altruistic or being a philanthropist, like, it appeals to me, but it appeals to the side of me that wants to be known and that wants to be seen as doing good. And sometimes just the best good I can do is leave here, go home, change for his nappy, make a bottle, and try and take a bit of pressure and try and be present. Try and be present with my family, because I've got 2 kids now, and it's like for them it's maybe like a 10-minute playing, but it's their whole childhood. It's going to be based around about me, my feelings and emotions, and that's why it's more important now more than ever that I work hard at this stuff.
No, I totally get that, but to do good feels good as well, and that's whether it be go home and change your child's nappy and give your missus a kiss, make her a cup of tea or whatever else. You're doing good by her or them, and you're feeling good after it. And doing a charity challenge like you're talking about, you're doing good. But there's no shame in feeling good. There's no shame in getting a bit of recognition for that as well, because you're helping people along the way. And going from where you've came from, Paul, for dealing with the traumatic offence of losing your gran and granddad and your uncle in such a short space of time, and seeing that effect that had on obviously your father and then your mum and your siblings as well, to then the addictions and the suicide attempt of your younger brother as well. Like, you should afford yourself like pats in the back for the way that you've came. What you're doing now as far as your own journey is now progressing to the point where you're able to enjoy life and enjoy the present moment, but also the massive help that you've gave to the many dozens, if not hundreds of people out there as well. Like, you're allowed to feel good, you're allowed to smile, give yourself a pat on the back of that, and think, do you know, I'm doing well considering the shit I've had to deal with.
That in itself's been a journey for me, is allowing myself those feelings and emotions, because when they come in, my initial reaction is to reject them, which is probably closely linked to the stuff I spoke about earlier, is that feeling of my worth and am I deserving of good things. So that's, you're correct in what you're saying. It's been a journey for me, and getting a balanced relationship with that stuff is what I'm working on today. And I would, if somebody gives me a compliment, I'll give them one back, and it's just to take the spotlight off me as quick as possible. So learning to accept, and I said this to Kelly, my sister, recently, is I gave her a compliment, she batted one back, and I says, just say thanks.
Just take it.
And she's just learning that. I've been learning that myself too. So I thanks for your compliment, and I'll take it. Thanks.
Paul, thanks very much for joining us today, mate. Honestly, a true inspiration. I look forward to following your journey.
Thanks, David.